Welcome to the new episode of All That Jazz. I'm your host, Matyash, and I have with me Frank van Waardenburg. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome, Frank.
Hello.
Hello.
What's up?
What's up? What's up, Frank? Okay, like I said to you before, usually I do with a guest, I do kind of pre-interview, but actually, why not try something new? And I also know you from before. You're a member
Yes.
of the Doc group on Facebook, and I think did we meet somewhere before there as well? Wait, hold on. No, wait, Letting Go group, right? We did the
Yes.
okay, right, yeah, okay.
Yes.
So Frank, or as you call it, the Frank unit, the body. So
Yes.
I know you're originally born in Indonesia.
I was.
So how was that?
Don't remember a thing. I
Right.
was 2 when I immigrated to the Netherlands, and I was 9 when I immigrated to the US.
Okay. Do you know any Dutch?
Ja, zeker.
So, but are you still fluent in Dutch?
Yeah, pretty, I get around just fine.
Yeah. And is that why your name is because the adopted parents were Dutch?
Actually, we were Dutch Indonesian, fairly common in that Indonesia was a Dutch colony for several hundred years, and so multiple mixed marriages later, here I am.
Okay, mixed marriages later. So are you happy the way that you ended up in the United States in the end?
Well, you get used to a place,
Right.
and people have this idea of wherever I live that, like, hey, we're number one, living in the US, and I'm used to the place. I like it here. I hadn't been back to Holland in quite a spell until 2019. And it's a remarkably efficient little country, and I really like it there. I haven't been to Indonesia since I left there when I was 2. We'll probably go there in 23. I have family there. But anyway, the US is nice.
Yeah. And the US also has changed a lot, and sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. I'm really concerned about the recent events, but perhaps it's all for the good. The saying that what happens, God can turn it for the good. Whatever happens, or with the right attitude, you can turn it for the good, right?
Well, I'm Hindu, and according to our understanding is that everything happens to us that to bring us closer to God.
Right.
So particularly when we have sorrowful events, and we all have those are the moments to really pay attention to, because but for those sorrowful events, we would never turn our attention to God.
Wow, that's a big one. Because yesterday I had something. It was something very small that happened, but I had such a sorrowful / depressing like feeling out of it. That was quite struck by it, and I wondered how come all these emotions came from just one little thing. It's weird how that happens in life. Sometimes people, when they on the outside, might look like they're totally fine, but then on the inside they're going through a small hell.
Yes.
And
Yes.
in the background you have, is that the Hindu is that one of the Hindu gods?
Ganesha, the elephant headed god, the Lord of obstacles.
Okay.
He is the remover of obstacles.
As
So
well.
a devout Hindu would never engage in an endeavor without first asking for support from Lord Ganesha.
Are you a devout Hindu?
Yeah, I can be better.
All right, let's go at the age of 9, right? You're in US, and
Yes.
what happens then when you obviously learn English then at some point?
Well, when you're 9 years old, I think within 6 months I was speaking fluently. I couldn't even tell that I had, was from a different country. And grew up. I don't know that I enjoyed my childhood immensely, and it was a struggle being over here. My mom and dad worked tirelessly to support me and my 2 sisters. It was not an easy life for them, but then it wasn't an easy life before then either. My dad was in a Japanese prisoner of war camp for 3.5 years in Indochina at the time,
Wow.
now Vietnam. And my mom was in a kind of a concentration camp in Indonesia for 2 or 3 years.
Why?
And then we immigrated to Holland, and things were pretty good in Holland, but we were lesser Dutch people. We were Dutch citizens, but we were brown Dutch citizens. And so it wasn't, I'm sure my dad suffered, some discriminatory kinds of behavior toward him, even though we had it fairly good economically.
Right. But
And
both of your parents are Indonesian, basically.
yes,
Oh,
half Indonesian and half European.
right. And why was your mother in a concentration camp?
Well, it was kind of a protectorate. From that because we were Dutch citizens, it was the Japanese occupation, and Dutch citizens, white and brown, were put into concentration camps, and they could be pretty brutal places. They were pretty much run by natives, and the indigenous Indonesians really didn't care much for either the white Dutch or the half Indonesian, half Dutch citizens. Understandably, there is no such thing as kind and gentle colonialism.
Right.
And so it was a difficult time, and we were forced to leave Indonesia after World War II. Revolution happened. Indonesia gained its independence, and it was not a good place. It was not a comfortable place for Dutch Indonesians, and most of us left.
Right.
Most of us to Holland.
But this was then a reaction to the colonialism. It wasn't.
It was reactive, sure.
Right. Okay. So, and then in US, you learn English fast, and then do you find the life is quite different than Netherlands?
I really haven't experienced life in Holland. I think the European nations have a more social support environment, which also is more, from my perspective, a more intrusive environment than the US. So, it's what you're used to, and I'm used to US life.
Right. There's pros and cons to the whole.
There are.
Yeah. So, but you moved to Washington State, right?
Oregon.
Sorry.
West Coast. Yes.
West Coast. And yeah, that's quite agreeable. That's nice nature.
It's very beautiful state. I love it here from about May until October. And then I got to get out of here because it's cold, wet, and miserable. Just got back from a couple of weeks in South Florida, got nice and brown again. And so I can now tolerate this place for a while again.
Being half Dutch or maybe a little bit Dutch, are you then taller than most Indonesians?
Uh, I don't think so. I'm 5'6", and
Okay.
so not. Certainly a lot shorter than the Dutch.
Right. Yeah, the Dutch, I know, are famously, I think the tallest nation in the world, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and then where your family was Hindu.
Well, actually, I became Hindu on the island of Kauai in 1999, which is the westernmost Hawaiian island. And I happened, the first time I visited there, my first morning, I explored with my car, which I used to do the same thing when I was a kid, by walking around, exploring your surroundings.
Right.
And I drove up this road, Kuamo'o Road, and I saw a little sign that said Hindu Monastery. And I go, boop. And I felt so good being there. And I sat under a murti, which is what it's called, a stone statue of Ganesha. And it's called a murti because to a Hindu, that murti, it's a stone object, but when we're worshiping that stone object, we believe that the God actually inhabits that murti during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sat under this Ganesha murti, and I went up there for every morning, just not every morning, but I was only there a week, but I think I spent 4 mornings up there. That's how good I felt being there, instead of going to the beach, right, in Hawaii.
Right.
And on the 3rd day, I met the master, one of the great mystics of modern times, Satguru Sivaya Subramania Swami. And he gave me the book, Merging with Shiva, Merging with God. And I've probably read that book a dozen times. I devoured it within 3 to 4 months when I first got it. And upon reading that book, life finally made sense to me. And it was clearly that I had returned to Hinduism because it was all so familiar. And so I must have been Hindu in a previous life.
Yeah, I think chances are that you were, because let's say, I don't know what the average, I think one time Dr. Hawkins calibrated in some lecture that the average was of the audience was 25 lifetimes, and that the average for mankind is 6. So I'm guessing for a spiritual aspirant, we've probably had more than the average amount of lifetimes. I could
Probably,
be wrong.
I would imagine.
Right. So it's highly likely, because Hinduism is one of the great old faiths of the world, probably the oldest, one of the oldest. Well,
It is the
Zoroaster maybe.
oldest,
Oh,
actually.
it's the oldest. Okay, cool. That's amazing. I wonder if I ever was Hindu. Probably.
Well,
So,
if you were an indigenous person, which we probably all were at one time, indigenous religions are really considered part of the overall diaspora of Hindu, or the ancient word for Hinduism is Sanatana Dharma, or the eternal religion, or the eternal path. And so, for example, the ancient Hawaiian religion is very closely parallel to Saivism, which is the most ancient of the Hindu sects. I refer to it as the Catholicism of Hinduism.
right.
And so so some of the indigenous religions of Europe, with their gods and goddesses, are very similar to Hinduism. And it's at its base is nature worship, in that Hindus view everything in creation as sacred. And so you're sacred, I'm sacred, this room is sacred, our talk is sacred, the garbage on the street is sacred. It's all from God. Without God, no life would exist.
Cows do have more of a special place in Hinduism, though.
Well, devout Hindus are vegetarian. I'm not vegetarian. And cows in particular, yes, they do hold a special place because they are such gentle creatures. They give so freely of their abundance, like milk, which is, some people, particularly in the West, believe that milk is, very unhealthy for you, but Hindus consume a lot of milk. I think it's a major source of protein, and so the cow gives all this food up so willingly, and so it is a revered animal, and it is also a revered because of its role in Hinduism, in that it is the animal associated with Saivism, the worship of Lord Shiva. And
Right.
outside of Shiva temples, you will see Nandi the bull, a murti of Nandi the bull, who welcomes visitors to the temple before you enter inside.
So bulls have also a special status.
And cows,
Right.
this part of it. Nandi the bull is the being that is particularly important in Saivism, the worship of Lord Shiva.
What's the how long is the process to convert to Hinduism? Because I know in Catholicism can be a year or sometimes 2 years, depending on the country.
Well, there is, and again, there is a process by which one can go, at which time one would accept a Hindu name, which I have not done. And I've not gone fully that route.
Right.
Partly, I think my philosophical framework is more of a universalism in seeing the truth in all religions and the commonality of all religions. And so the framework with which I see life now is more Advaita, or non-duality. And there's a framework of philosophy called Advaita Vedanta, which in the Vedas are the holy books of India. And Advaita is the non-dual philosophy within the Vedas.
Right. Would that be the Upanishads and books like that?
The Upanishads are part of the Vedas, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So how did your life change then when you were converted to Hinduism? Or it started to be, well, I guess you didn't fully convert, but you...
Well, when Gurudeva, Sadhguru Sivaya Subramania Swami, gave me the book Merging with Shiva, the only words he ever spoke directly to me was, this book will change your life. And I said, I'm ready. And I was totally joking. But it definitely has had a profound and deeply profound impact on my life. And yeah, I'm eternally grateful to Gurudeva. He passed in 2001. I think he's very much with me still. And as I understand it, he has reincarnated already, and he's a young boy in the south of India. And so it's quite possible that I had spent a previous lifetime or lifetimes with him.
Mm. So he comes from a lineage where you reincarnate and you kind of like Dalai Lama in Buddhism?
A little bit like that. It's a little bit different in that in this particular lineage, and I don't know whether it is in other lineages, but the Satguru, which is, everybody's a guru these days, but Satguru is an actual lineage of heritage. And Gurudeva was pronounced Satguru by his Satguru, Yogaswami of Jaffna, South India.
Right.
And so he was proclaimed. And so when Gurudeva passed in 2001, he proclaimed Bodhinata, Satguru Bodhinata, as the successor Satguru. But it's from an ancient lineage that has a lineage of known gurus dating back some 6,000 years.
Mm. Well, are you referring to the current Sadhguru, the very famous one that's like maybe 55 or 60 now? But I don't think he comes from a lineage. He was a regular man, seems like.
Oh, the fellow Satguru.
Yeah.
Well, I won't say anything.
I knew you're gonna say that. The way you looked up, I was like, "Oh, this is over."
A Satguru is a hereditary lineage.
Right. Okay.
To call yourself a Satguru is really not consistent with the Hindu philosophy.
Right. Right. So he called himself Sadhguru, or you don't want to talk even about that?
I don't know.
Oh,
but
okay.
He's not. Yeah, but I'm certain that he's not a Sadhguru in the historical sense of lineage.
No, he's not. He was a regular businessman or something before he became what he is now. Anyway, be that as it may. Hello. So you are so you are Hindu, and then does that involve then kind of regular prayer or meditation?
I meditate. I kind of got away from it. I got COVID in September and went through a period of depression for a while. And in fact, my dad died about a month before that, and so I'm kind of definitely in a life transition, in that I've been a caregiver my whole life. I have 4 kids. I have 3 granddaughters that I've been very close to and helped to take care of them when they were very young. Then I took care of my mom until she passed. And then I took care of my dad until I'm 69, which was last year. And this year I'm going to be 70. And so I kind of went through an identity crisis. Well, if I'm no longer a caregiver, then what am I?
Right.
And so anyway, so I've kind of gotten away from it, but definitely it includes the practice of doing some hatha yoga every morning and some meditation. And but I think the goal ultimately for an Advaitin like me, and a believer in Advaita, is to approach life as 24/7 God consciousness, which means that you're always worshipful. I think you can look at the beauty of the trees or in nature and be connected in a deep way with God.
Right. So then at what point did you find also other spiritual teachers after your teacher passed away?
Yes, my current teacher, and has been for about 15 years, is a fellow by the name of Sri M, out of Madanapalli, the south of India. Lovely fellow. And so I have a strong, very powerful admiration for him.
Do you have like a correspondence with him? Like if he's a teacher, does it involve that?
He has written books. He's definitely not a lineage guy, like Gurudeva, like Sadhguru Sivaya Subramaniya Swami. He calls himself a friend on the path. And I think he has something to lend to the people who are in contact with him. He doesn't call himself a guru. In fact, he dislikes the whole thing. And I would say that would be consistent with a teacher who is not of a lineage that starts calling himself a guru or a Satguru.
Yeah,
and would never call himself a guru.
Yeah, and then the guru, the the title guru has been misused and
It
maligned
is.
and you know, like profiteered by people. And a lot of fake gurus, especially in India, it has become a sort of industry in the last 100 years. So I
If
think
you want salvation badly enough, there'll be somebody to sell it to you.
yeah. I mean, that's what it is. Capitalism at its best and worst, you know.
Here a guru, there a guru, everywhere a guru guru.
Right. And then at what
So it is
point
a
did
great, I would say it's a great karma to meet someone that can give you authentic teachings.
what other teachers have you found as well?
Well, Ramana Maharshi,
Mm,
oh gosh, sorry, I'm having trouble here. Ramana Maharshi, Robert Adams of the US, who was also spent time with Ramana, Nisargadatta Maharaj. I think Nisargadatta Maharaj and Ramana Maharshi are probably the most well-known Advaitins,
yes.
modern Advaitins.
And at some point you also came across the works of David Hawkins.
Yes, not too long after I started immersing myself into Hinduism, or at least Saivism, I came across Hawkins, and it was truly beautiful how this fellow has information that is absolutely aligned with the teachings of the Vedas. And he comes at it from a Western frame of mind, which is unique. And I think he is probably very helpful to many Westerners because Westerners don't have the framework that people in the East do. I mean, you know, we think we know it all, we Westerners, and we think we don't need a guru, you know, we don't need a master. We don't need to follow anyone. We're so to really obey a master is really kind of out of the mental context of most Westerners.
Right. And also I don't think he was called, you know, he wasn't called or demanded to be called a guru or anything. Although he is considered a spiritual teacher, obviously, but
I think if he had come from India, he would have been called a guru, and
yes, right,
and recognized as such. And that's another thing. There is no recognition of a spiritual heritage in the West. You know, we're very materialistic, and in India and in Asia, there is more of an understanding and acceptance of spiritual knowledge.
Yeah, it becomes quite like if somebody's a best-selling author, which I guess you could argue David Hawkins is, then
He certainly is.
Then gains credibility in a way, which is not obviously, you know, what sells the most is not usually, you know, true. But then again,
correct.
The most selling book in the world, I think, in the history is probably the Bible, which is, you know, quite properly a lot of truth in the Bible. So
yes.
But that's not always the case with best-selling things. So
and
anyway.
I don't know how well. I mean, we certainly know that there are a lot of people who really respect Dr. Hawkins and follow his work closely, and I certainly appreciate his work. You know, I don't know what the volume of the sales are compared to, you know, Chicken Soup for the Soul, for example. I would say fairly small compared to that author.
Right. Although it does seem like it's picking up, because I've seen a lot of people discovering his work more and more, seems like every year.
Well, you know, we did cross the line, the delineation point from truth to truth, beginning in about 1987, 1988.
Right.
And so I think Hawkins at one point said that we are now under the energies that we are currently influenced by. A human has 1,000 times more potential of attaining enlightenment.
Also part of I think his work and then maybe others of information that's available as well. And that's quite encouraging though, because if only a few people gain to a higher consciousness, then not that they cause a thing, but you know, they lift up the whole sea level of humanity, as it were. So
Yes,
yeah.
it only takes one.
It could be you. You could be you.
It could be. You know,
um
people always want to start a movement, and I go, no, just you.
right, be like the old Gandhi line, be the change you want to see. Like you know,
Right.
just do it yourself, you know, just move move yourself up, and it'll be good, you know. It'll be
That's
good for
right.
everybody, you know.
That's right.
I don't know if
Well,
you
and the whole framework of Eastern philosophy of, you work on yourself.
yeah.
Change happens within.
But you know, in the West, there's a curious movement as well with the, I don't know if you're aware, Jordan Peterson, the whole, instead of changing the world, start by cleaning your room, you know, and that kind of realism, I think it's really quite proper.
You know, I've seen a lot of stuff, attributed to him, and I really haven't paid that much attention. But I think I won't be able to help but pay attention because it seems to come up frequently on Instagram and Facebook. So
Yeah, I think as far as best-selling things, I think he probably sold a lot more books right now than David Hawkins, but you know, David Hawkins' work is one of those that will have, because of its power, its work, it'll have longevity over a long period of time. And not saying Jordan Peterson's won't, but it's a different domain. I think he's more of the
I think every level has its teachers,
yes.
and Hawkins says this, and so we can't say that, oh well, he's not as good as my teacher. That's silly.
Right.
It's like, and it's described in some of the Hindu philosophy this way: the person, the seeker who is halfway up the mountain does not criticize the seekers who are still in the valleys because they came through that valley also.
Oh man, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Or you can't criticize like a grass that's just starting to grow while you're like fully, up and to like, I don't know what it is, 2 inches off the ground while they're just popping out, because you started before, you've had lifetimes, you've had many more lifetimes, let's say, or you don't know what the others are going through, or how, so
I think
I'll
the most important aspect here is, and Hawkins certainly talks about this, is you can't attribute it to me. So, for example, when there is no me to experience enlightenment, when there is an attainment of that state, the me will have disappeared. So we cannot say that I am enlightened, nor can we say really that, I found this guru.
it was me.
See how great I am.
But so there's an element of fate that, like, I always come back to what Winston Churchill said. He thought, this is in his first book, one of his first books is called My Early Life. It was autobiography, and he said that he thought that predetermination and what's the other, free will and predetermination are the same thing, he said. And
well, Hawkins talks about that also.
yes,
He says, yes, you have free will, but within a range of consciousness. So one who is in a state of lovingness, the 500s, may have the option to rape, steal, and plunder, but it doesn't it isn't consistent with that range of consciousness, though, that it's highly unlikely to happen unless there is a great decline in that consciousness.
Right. But wouldn't you say then that it's not even an option then? Because like you wouldn't even consider, I guess, or maybe it's just a passing thought, like when you're angry.
Well, you know, boy, there's a philosophical discourse that
Sure.
might take a long time to cover. You know, it's kind of like you know, Hitler calibrated in the 400s, and then went all the way down to the 30s, I think, according to the calibration from Hawkins. Who else? Oh yeah, Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, whom Hawkins attributes the fall. I think he even calibrated in Enlightenment, maybe.
Yes,
600.
no, 720.
700. And
Yeah.
but according from Hawkins to a brain tumor that caused him to fall.
Temporal lobe epilepsy.
Okay, yeah. And so so there can be, and I have been personally, I'm aware of this this easy route to succumbing
Right.
to the desires that make one fall. And I think the most important one that has kind of kept me, I'll go ahead and call it safe, although that may not be the correct word, is to never refer to myself as a teacher, because, you know, that's got to be the ultimate human ego thing, to call yourself a teacher of spirituality.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've seen in circles of students of Dr. Hawkins, or doc students as we call them, I've seen some people that have then took on the roles of teacher, and then stuff happens that is
It's a
not
minefield.
good. It's not good. I know two examples that are pretty bad.
It's a minefield.
Yes. Yeah, and then there's also the problem with that as well. The calibration issue becomes in, because some people are like saying they're proficient and all that, and they start calibrating not only all the people but themselves, and like, and then all of a sudden they're like, I'm 570. Or I've heard people say where I don't know if they're new to doc or they don't understand the work, but I've had some person contact me and say, yeah, I'm at you know, at the maximum level, I'm like,
You know what I like to say?
hey.
I'm at 1200.
Yeah,
which we know is impossible according to Doc's scale.
well, I'm already evolved into Homo spiritus. I'm at 5,000. All right, let's switch gears a little bit and see what was your occupation like? What was your thing to do in life?
For 25 years, I was involved in insurance and finance.
Oh, okay. You studied finance.
I didn't study it. I fell into it. Basically, I was in sales. They call us, you know, you might give yourself the title of stockbroker or vice president of sales. You know, if you'll hang out long enough in a brokerage firm, you get to be a vice president. So you get to put that on your business card and say, oh yeah, now you're dealing with a VP, baby.
Right.
But we're just salesmen. We're just salespeople.
Okay. So so that, I guess that went well. You have an interest in it?
Well, I like to point out that I have that's part of my insanity, is that I am obsessed with it.
Oh.
You know why? Who knows? I just am. It's a fascinating field to me.
But what I found is that there's no there's particularly in sports, I find that there's no player that has become great that wasn't obsessed. Sometimes, although rarely some players are gifted, they're not actually obsessed with, let's say, basketball. Let's take or foot, like soccer, what you call their soccer. That usually there's a measure of obsession. Like I distinctly remember Steven Gerrard, the late player, now manager. He would say he wouldn't leave a training session without doing everything that he wanted to do, like perfectly, like trying to strive for perfection, basically. And Kobe Bryant was the same in basketball.
And I would say, I like to be good. I used to be a pretty good racquetball player when I was younger. And I stopped playing racquetball because I would literally drive myself insane to win. But only in tournaments. When I was just playing, recreationally, I'd play well, but there were a lot of guys who could beat me. But when I was in a tournament, I was going to win. And there were a lot of guys who were better players than me that I beat.
Really? Because you're like so intent on beating them.
I was going to win. In fact, I had this one buddy, we regularly played, and he was a wiry little guy. He was about 10 years older than me, but he was he was a retired Navy flyer, and he'd actually been up in space, and he was just a wiry, hardcore man guy. And he would always beat me when we were playing. And he would, one time he said, yeah, well, I always win. I said, Marty, never in tournaments. And then he bowed down his head. Yeah, you're right, Frank.
You beat him in tournaments.
I always beat him in tournaments.
Why? Because you ramped up your game in tournaments. You were like so intent on winning, huh?
I was going to win.
It's something to be said about the human will, like the deciding to do something and really sticking out and doing it.
Yes, but it drove me insane. It drove me to leave the game because it would take me several days to recover from the chemical state of my body with all that adrenaline and
Yeah, that reminded me of Bill Russell, like the Boston Celtics. Sometimes he would throw up before the games and stuff because he was so intent on winning, and obviously he had won more championships than I think any other player in NBA history. But he got really nervous before games and all. But I think that signifies that it was important to him,
Right. In high school, I was a wrestler. And I too had that. I wasn't that good a wrestler, but I had that same nervousness, upset stomach, throwing up, because I was determined. I wanted to be good.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like before I do these things as well, I feel like, I hope I'm gonna be on my game today, and I'm not. And then once I start, usually I'm okay. But yeah,
you have a very relaxed approach that I think is a winning formula.
but sometimes before I start, it's very much kind of like, because you're always going into uncharted waters, no matter what you do.
Yes.
You don't know how it's going to go.
Yes.
Yeah. So and you said in our private correspondence that you had predicted some.
Why don't we move to that now?
Yes.
So in 1990, I went to work for Prudential Securities, a big brokerage firm in the United States. And I was very much of the opinion that the stock market was in great shape and that people should put their money in stocks. And we had just come off a recession, I think. But in any case, so people would ask me, well, how much of my portfolio should I put in here? And I go, as much as you dare. and so anyway, so I sold a lot, mostly stock funds. And toward the end of the, that went fine for until about 86 or so. And I started feeling very queasy. Whenever I feel discomfort in my tummy, and I didn't even know what that was.
Hold on. So you started in 1980, not 1990, right? I misunderstood.
1990.
Oh, 1990,
yeah, I'm sorry.
right?
I got mixed up there.
Okay,
1990.
right. 1990,
Right.
okay. And
so toward the end of the middle 90s, end of 90s, toward past the mid 90s, I started to just feel very uncomfortable. And I advised my clients to get out of the market. And people don't like you to change. So I lost most of my clients.
right.
And I also stopped selling funds. And then the dot-com bubble burst. The whole market went down 80%, 70, 80, 90%, depending on which index you followed.
Right.
But it was mostly gut feelings, but that was also, I'm a highly curious person. And so when I started selling securities, I became a student of securities. I wanted to understand things. And so I became a voracious consumer of information. I read books. I read the Wall Street Journal every day. I wanted to understand things. So anyway, that happened. And then I went on to do other things.
So you're right, basically, because your feeling was right. Because 2 years, it sounds like at least a year or 2 years before
I was
the
about
crash.
2 years early.
Right.
But better to be 2 years early than a day late.
Did you buy when after everything crashed? Did you start buying? Be like, oh, this will.
Well, it took a long time to
fully
come
go
back.
down. Okay, right.
It was a long bear market after that, and I've never had a lot of money. My ability to make money for others has not been true of my own situation. So,
right.
So my karma doesn't seem to be there.
Right, one of those. Like you can make money for others, but not.
Well, I tend to be very conservative when I'm advising people, and I tend to be more of a gambler when I'm doing my own thing.
Oh, I see. Okay, you
I love
don't
to
take your own.
gamble.
You don't take your own advice. You don't take all advice in financial matters.
I don't recommend anyone do what I do.
Right, and you would never advise anybody else to do what you do, because you.
No, I absolutely do not do what I do, including don't go on the spiritual path. You won't like it.
Well, that might be actually a good thing. It's just that you'll take.
It's not for the faint of heart.
You'll be quite a roller coaster, as it were.
It's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, yeah. And you end up in the trenches, and you end up facing the mud and manure everywhere, and the dark valleys, all that stuff.
Well, that was up when I went on a holy pilgrimage in the Himalayas, and I went to one of the most important temples of India, high in the Himalayas, and I recall this one area that we went through, and I call it the ocean of donkey shit. I mean, there were donkeys ferrying people up to this holy pilgrimage site, and we passed this area that I referred to as the ocean of the ocean of compassion. Well, this was the ocean of donkey shit up at the 13,000 foot level of the Himalayas.
Wow.
I don't recommend it.
But getting at the final destination was nice, but I guess the journey wasn't too nice.
The destination wasn't so great either. I thought I was going to freeze to death that night, literally.
Ooh, okay.
That first night.
Should have brought an electric blanket or something, electrically heated.
There was no electric outlet in our room.
Oh.
In fact, 2 weeks before we had arrived at this destination in Kedarnath, one of the spiritual purification sites, Kedarnath Temple, I think 14 pilgrims had succumbed to the weather and perished up there. So wow. It's this pilgrimage is a serious thing.
Can you imagine like going to the other side, like oh, and they see cause of death, pilgrimage. You're like, oh, you did all right.
Cause of death, pilgrimage. Not COVID, pilgrimage.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, so going back.
So I was right. And so I did I did some other things for a while. I started selling fixed income securities,
Right.
like, you put your money there, you get 3% a year.
That's safe. Or was safe.
Fixed instruments for quite a while after that. Then I went into the mortgage business. And during that time, the housing collapse began in 2006 or 7, I believe, and then finally reached its depth about 2012.
Right.
It was, and it was worldwide, and it was spectacular.
Yeah.
And I began getting queasy about selling mortgages to people. And there was some crazy stuff happening. I call the reason for it as the banking orgy. I mean, money was, sure, come and get our money, and it created a lot of real estate speculation. Anyway, I started so before that, I became interested in cycles. I wanted to understand things. And since we were coming upon 2012, it started out with the Mayan calendar for me to begin the understanding of cycles. And the Mayan calendar's first interest with me started back in about 1972 or 1973, when I spent 4 months roaming around Mexico. And I came upon this I was given a book that was written by a fellow by the name of Tony Shearer, who wrote a book, Quetzalcoatl, Lord of the Dawn. And when I read that book, kind of Mexico became magical and alive to me. And I was at the temple archaeological site of Monte Alban, which was south of Oaxaca.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony Shearer was the first individual who identified, he may not have been the first, but he was certainly the first one to actually talk about it, harmonic convergence of 1987.
Wow.
And it was Jose Arguelles who took it and, made a big to-do out of it. I don't know that he ever really gave proper
credit,
respect to Tony Shearer, but it was actually Tony Shearer. And we know from Doc's work that around that time, human consciousness first went past the critical
200 level.
Went to 200. It went to 205 in about 1988.
Yeah.
87,
I think. 87.
Yeah. So my love affair with Mexico began way long time ago, in early 70s.
It must have been quite a place in 70s.
It was very
crazy
different.
Hairstyles, the ugly cars of the 70s, all that stuff.
It was very different. Mostly it was just a bunch of hippies like me running around having a good time.
Right.
Smoking pot, eating magic mushrooms, and
you had long hair, I imagine.
I did, and I now have long hair again down to my waist.
Right.
So, the past revisited.
This cycle has repeated.
It has. It has.
So with different color hair, I imagine. All right. Did you participate in the harmonic convergence, by the way?
Pardon me?
Did you participate in the
there were things that were going on that were followers, that were people who were very much like Jose Arguelles, and we had ceremonies around the Portland area where I live, and it was a fun time, anticipating what was going to happen. I think there is actually a lot of esoteric element of the Mayan calendar, which did actually end in 2012. And it was what was it, a 5,200 year cycle or 6,000, anyway, around 6,000 year cycle, which is, if you start exploring the esoterics behind it, is we were supposed to blow ourselves up again before then.
Right. Yeah, I remember working on December 21st, 2012, and I thought to myself, "Or is this the day? Is this the day when the world is going to end?" And I was working, so I was expecting it. I was like, "Come on, let it happen." But let it happen. But then it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. And so, but from a cycles perspective, human civilization was once again targeting itself for self-destruction. Yet one more cycle of human presence on the planet Earth. I think the fifth cycle, the fifth race is what it's referred to.
So this is where we are now.
So I studied the calendar, and I wanted to see, was there anything to this? And I said, definitely we're coming to another cycle. Because I was Hindu, I also studied the cosmological cycles of Hinduism, which are called the yugas.
Right.
And according to that perspective, we have moved into Sat Yuga out of Kali Yuga. We have moved out of the age of darkness and we are in the age of light. And I think similarly, 2012 was a transition point. And certainly, so we are in a time of transition. And I mean, look outside, look at what's happening in our world. Pretty clearly something big is happening.
Yeah, crazy.
And even though we are suddenly, the jumps of consciousness, as we know by following Hawkins' work, happen quite abruptly. Just because the light turns on doesn't mean 7.5 billion people suddenly become enlightened.
Right.
It all happens very gradually, and we wish things would change rapidly, but they do not.
Right.
So we are in another time of transition, and I think that the transition period will probably end around 2030 or so. So we'll see lots more. So we're going to be in a time of turmoil for some time to come.
Do you know about the work of Alice Bailey? Because Doc always talked about the book called Glamour, A World Problem, and glamour is energy. He was always talking about that. But in the book itself, I found that there was one prediction in the book, and it said that there's a worldwide sociological and political problem that won't be resolved until the year 2025, including the energy of glamour, that there will be something different after 2025. So I'm really curious because, I mean, obviously there's a 5-year difference in the predictions, but it seems like there is,
and that's
something...
a short time, of course, in historical perspective.
Right. But it seems like 2025, that's like 3 years. That's around the corner. And that seems like, that's when the next US president, or hopefully it won't be the same one as this one now, because my goodness. But
that's a whole other subject.
Yes. But it's interesting, that you're predicting 2030, and Alice Bailey in that book, Glamour, and other books as well, she's predicting 2025, or the White Brotherhood, actually, because she was channeling their predictions, I think, not just hers.
Well, that's actually based on that we're in, I think it's been referred to as the dark rift. So we are actually in an energy field that humans have never experienced in Earth. There's not just Earth going around the sun. There's our solar system going around a central point.
Right.
And there's also our galaxy going around a point, which takes, millions of years. And going around the galactic center takes thousands of years. So these cycles do give us different energies, and so we're in, and I think it's been referred to as the dark rift, that
Right.
we're in this point right now. And according to, and I'll get to astrology here pretty quickly. A fellow by the name of Raymond Merriman, and I'll show his book here in a second. I think his 2019 forecast, financial forecast, was called, or maybe it was 2020, the Great Reset.
Wow. Which is
The Great
very
Reset.
very infamous among some circles, because the Great Reset actually does mean that some World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, you own less, but you'll be happy.
I'll call it consciousness. Well, the Great Reset is really about consciousness.
Right. But the other Great Reset where it's like they're hoping to basically be the rulers of the world, and people are going to own less and be happy and all that. So
everything will change. Everything will change.
Hopefully for the better.
Absolutely. We're in Sat Yuga. We're just entering the age of light.
Right.
We're just out of the age of darkness.
It seems to me, though, that the darkness, the dark rift that you're referring to, maybe that started more prominently in 2020.
It started well before 2012.
Right.
There's a 36-year period of time.
36. Okay. It does seem to coincide with political correctness, cultural Marxism, critical race theory becoming all now mainstream. Very
Yes.
mainstream.
Yes.
To the detriment of everyone in the Western world, because according to some of my friends, the West, some countries in the West have dropped considerably. I don't know if that's true, but in the past 2 years, there's been a lot of, man, I don't know. I told my friend that it seems like in the last 2 years, the West has taken giant leaps backwards, but that may be only temporarily, I hope.
It is. It has been described this way. With the advent of light, and I'm talking about the light of consciousness, darkness has no place to hide. And so we're seeing things that have always been around, but it's been well hidden. So, for example, sexual trafficking. I think we've got Prince Andrew involved in that, Jeffrey Epstein, but we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg on that.
Right.
I think when it all comes to light, we're going to be horrified as to the depravity and the level of involvement of people with lots and lots of money and power. And so the darkness has nowhere to hide. And so we're seeing that. So we're seeing this thing. You can call it a war if you want to, but it's just, it's coming to light. And so it's fighting. There is a fight, in essence, that's going on. But we are in Sat Yuga. And I have no doubt about that. You can take that to the bank. We are in Sat Yuga. Which
means that this short period of darkness will be followed by more higher levels.
More and more positive. We have to expose all of these dark practices of humanity, expose them so that they can be healed.
I always thought that this has been my premonition for the past couple of years, that things are going to get worse before they get better, and it seems to be something that is happening. Although
change is never comfortable.
Although I sense that there's a shift that, because how change is. Like when I look back at some movies from 2005, it looked like they were made in the 80s, like the technology, the music and all that, the way they edited. So it seems like human progress is like speeding up almost. It's crazy how how
Well,
fast
the
it's
Mayan
going.
calendar speaks to that actually, and what we are seeing is actually what we think of as time speeding up is actually it's creation that's speeding up. So we have huge changes occurring in increasingly compressed periods of time. And so it's creation that's speeding up. And
Okay.
we don't like it. We humans don't like it.
I mean, I'd like it if it was positive, but I see.
Well, it is. It is. But we
Hopefully.
don't like any change. You know, we want improvement, but we don't want anything to change.
Right, right, right. So, are you predicting a big change in a couple of years, as in financial markets,
It might
or?
not even there may not even be you know I'm going to be 70 this year, and we may I think my grandchildren will grow up in a very different world than I've grown up in, and you're much younger than I am. So, we just have to accept that things are slow, and humans would literally go insane if things change too quickly. We would implode. We would go crazy. So we have to just be comfortable with baby steps, constant baby steps. But you can take this to the bank. We are in Sat Yuga.
Okay, so let me clarify again. The Great Reset book that you're referring to is referring to
Yes.
positive change. It's not referring to what is commonly in my circles known as Great Reset, which is actually worldwide totalitarian one world government kind of thing.
No.
No, okay.
No. I think the Great Reset refers to consciousness. Okay, so we can go to all kinds of dark ideas about this, like one world government and controls, but we're in Sat Yuga. That kind of, we have to look at this in a way of, so for example, I talk about money. Well, in Sat Yuga, we have to we're looking at a future where money isn't so tightly controlled by greed. And it cannot be controlled by greed. We'll move to a time where companies who engage in wrongdoing just can't survive.
Right.
We'll move into a time where politicians who are do nothing but malign others just won't be voted in, because our consciousness is changing.
Right.
We won't accept it.
And hopefully there won't be election fraud anymore as well.
That too. It won't be tolerated. We will, in a new consciousness, things will feel less and less. We'll feel less and less comfortable with those kind of things. And even in war, remember when the USSR collapsed?
Yep.
How close were we to nuclear annihilation before then? And who would have predicted that the USSR would fall? No one predicted that. Impossible. And yet, here we are. There are no major wars going on anymore in the world. The only kind of wars that are going on today are internal conflicts, which are, important philosophical differences between what we want our country to look like.
Right.
We don't have a lot of despotic leaders who are murdering millions of their own countrymen anymore. We don't have that anymore.
Well, except North Korea, except maybe North Korea is the exception.
They're starving people to death, but
Yes.
there's still things like that going on. It hasn't completely disappeared, but we're not looking at like a Pol Pot or a Hitler or
right.
anything like that. It's like, and we're talking about Russia wants to invade Ukraine, and the whole world is kind of scratching their heads right now. It says, who does that?
Exactly. But I
Who
guess
does that? So, you know, it's such an aberration for today's framework of world. You know, I remember when the European Union first started forming, and having been being a citizen of Europe, I was thinking, they all hate each other. It'll never work.
and you were half right, maybe, because the country I'm in, UK, we have left the union. I think it's quite imperfect in a way, but
Of course.
some countries I think are lifted up by it, and some are dragged down by the union.
But you know, we don't see the Germans, crossing into France with panzers.
I knew you were gonna say that. Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, and they have a united currency. I mean, I thought it would never work, and here it is. It's either the first or the second strongest currency in the world.
Right. What do you think about, to ask you directly about the last 2 years, the vaccine mandates and then the whole COVID thing and the masks and all that? If you want to talk about it.
I'm sick and tired of the subject, tell you the truth. I've chosen not to be vaccinated at first because I didn't want to, and I didn't really know anything about it. But as we've gone on, I've decided that I was right not to be vaccinated. It was the best thing. I think we're finally starting to see some information that's contrary and that's allowed to be actually published on the CDC, Centers for Disease Control here in the U.S. There's finally an article about natural immunity, a study. And the conclusion of this study is that if you have natural immunity because you had COVID, and I had COVID back in September, that a vaccination does not increase immunity.
Wow.
So it seems like the natural immunity is quite effective. We're now finally, all the emails and all that, which took practically an act of God for Congress, US Congress to get a hold of, we're finding out that there was not really at all a consensus among scientists that we should shut down everything and all that. So I think things will emerge, the origins of COVID, says, well, it just happens to be a site of a virus super lab, but it came from the wet market.
The wet market? What do you mean?
How could you believe this? But that's just my opinion.
Okay. Yeah,
there's a lot of new things. It's like I remember reading articles that most deaths in the United States are actually attributed to the practice of medicine itself. Yes, right. Here in the United States. So, for example, a lot of people my age, baby boomers, not a lot, but have what's that virus? I can't even remember what the virus is, but it's the story behind it was, well, we were shooting up heroin, we were engaged in free-for-all sex.
HIV or
not HIV.
It's okay.
Anyway, guess what? And anyway, because of drug use and because of free sex, and it turns out to be that the origins of it are actually improper sterilization of medical equipment, and that's where the disease that is fairly common among baby boomers. Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah, I think that I also foresee in the future there'll be an integration of Western, Eastern, and alternative medicine, and there'll be a kind of integration of all of that. And
Well, I've been studying alternate healing now for a couple of years. Actually, my interest in it started about 30 years ago when I became interested in Reiki.
right.
And I think the future of healing is consciousness itself. And there's an interesting study that I saw. We're all familiar with the placebo effect,
Yes.
where we have a group that gets medication and a group that gets placebo and a group that gets nothing. The group that gets the medication has a certain rate of improvement of conditions. The group that gets the placebo has a lesser proportion of people who improve, but not as great as the ones who receive the medication. And then the control group, literally, there's no improvement whatsoever.
Right.
But in those old studies, the placebo people did not know they received a placebo. There have been more recent studies with the placebo effect that where people were told, this is a placebo. And guess what? There was a group, they had a higher probability of healing than people who got nothing, and not as great as the people with the medication, but
Right.
still, here's a placebo, it'll cure you. And they go, okay, well, they healed.
Right.
Right?
Power of the mind. Power of the mind. It's great.
Consciousness itself is the source of healing.
So consciousness-based medicine, like body talk and all that. I think
Body talk. Yes.
Yes.
Michelle,
yes, she was on my podcast.
Yes. So that is the future of healing, is consciousness itself. I mean, spontaneous remission has become so common that the West had to come up with a name for it. And when the West comes up for a name for it, they kind of, okay, we now understand it because we've given it a name.
But you don't understand it. Spontaneous
remission. We don't
remission.
understand it at all, but we have named it.
Right. Right.
But it's so common that we have a name for it.
Yeah. It's what the Catholic Church also uses for to prove miracles as well. Spontaneous healings that cannot be explained, and that's the basis of also then to make a case of declaring somebody a saint, the person has to first die, and then people pray to that saint, saint to be, and then there has to be 2 or 3 medically proven miracles of spontaneous remission, let's say, or something like that, and then that's the basis for to declare a person
part
a
of
saint.
The process.
Yes. It's fascinating.
And that's consciousness.
Right.
Pure
right.
and simple.
So
anyway, getting back to if you want to, going back to my work. So in 2005, I gave my first lecture here in Oregon on what I saw was an impending housing collapse. And from my perspective, you'd have to be an absolute moron not to see it.
Right.
Well, nobody saw it, but I saw it. I was involved in the mortgage business at that time, and I got out of doing mortgages because I thought, this is not going to end well. And so I started lecturing based on the Mayan calendar, the yugas, Sat Yuga, and I finally discovered that, and when I was selling securities back in the 90s, I read a lot about economic theories. And because I was trying to figure out, how do these things work? When can we predict collapses coming? Can we predict? And so, there are studies that go all the way back to the tulip bubble of the 1600s, when tulips were more valuable than gold. Yeah, there was a speculative frenzy in tulips.
Oh, man.
Yes, back in the 1600s. There was a bubble. It was a bubble that happened. And so I studied, lots of economic theory and, mostly alternative economic theory, but they were still from one of the major proponents of some interesting theories, with a fellow by the name of Kondratiev. He was a Russian economist back in the 30s or something like that. His theories are still studied in economics programs. And, but anyway, I finally came upon it, that astrology was the only consistent predictor of economic futures. The only.
Imagine that as a PhD thesis in economics. Imagine that title.
You'd be excommunicated. They would take your PhD away. But you know what's funny?
What?
Major brokerage houses subscribe to these reports. Believe me.
Academia is always, unfortunately, behind the times, because academia is conformity of mind to everybody. There has to be consensus and all that, versus brokerage is all about what works, and so they must be at the leading edge of science, or whatever.
Well, and if you don't believe what we call the majority, then we will ridicule you and
excommunicate
and make you lose your position of tenure at your university. The person who was the most vocal opponent to things like shutdowns and all that for COVID was actually a pollution scientist. and why was and she said, no, we need masks. That's about it. Because these particles are carried in the air. And so, during the first year or so, we were just crazily scrubbing down surfaces, trying to, but she was a dissenter, and she was ridiculed, and she was, oh, but you're not a virologist, you're not a study, you're not schooled in the study of viruses.
Right.
So she was condemned and ridiculed. Guess what? She was right. And now those reports are finally coming to surface.
Wow.
And that's what happens in science. If you don't agree, the old thing of, if you don't agree with if you're not part of the Flat Earth Society, we're going to burn you at the stake.
Right. We're gonna cancel you. Now the current trend is, if you don't agree with some of the main things, if you spread COVID misinformation, as it were, we're gonna try to cancel you. And they've tried to cancel Joe Rogan lately, and digging up dirt on him, and I think you'll be unsuccessful, hopefully. But
that's the way science works. Science creates a little insular capsule around itself, and new information cannot get in.
Yeah. And
contrary information is maligned. So anyway, I started lecturing around 2005 on what I saw was a housing collapse. And guess what? I was right once again.
Did you record these lectures? You should have recorded it and put it on YouTube.
Well, there is actually one online that happened at the Metaphysical Lab Library in Ashland, Oregon, Southern Oregon. It's online.
Okay. Is it on YouTube?
And it was from 2005.
I can link it then. If it's on YouTube, I can link it.
You can link it.
Okay.
And then my good friend Liliana, she was one of my longest time supporter of my work, and helped promote me. And right after the COVID crash, stock market crash,
we still have you, Frank. You're still with us.
She contacted me, and because people were freaking out. The market lost 40-50% in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. And
so she interviewed me for a while after that, and I said, well, buy the dip. Okay, that was 2020. Well, the NASDAQ has gone up 140% since then. I was right.
You're okay. Let's go into something maybe out. This is maybe outside your field. I don't know how much you studied this, but crypto has been a huge thing starting in 2009 or 8, and now it's boomed into a trillion, more than a 2 trillion industry, or I don't know, yeah, industry, you could call it that. So what do you think of that?
I think the current status of that medium is too volatile for serious investors. So have fun with it. If you make $1 billion, great. But I think it's too volatile to be looked at seriously. On the long haul, however, if we think about the aspect of freedom, I think about international banking as a cartel, and that we bypass that cartel.
Yes.
I think is what we all want. And so I think crypto or some kind of digital currency is the future. But at least at this point, the market's only about, what, 10, 12 years old? So from a perspective of being able to analyze trends, there's not enough time to really look at it with any degree of confidence. So for example, in looking at stock market trends, with astrology, we've got really hundreds of years that we can look at, because even the US, which is only a couple of 100 years old, it very, very much mirrors the markets of Great Britain. Mm-hmm. And so we can go back a long time and we can look at trends that way. And we can have a certain degree of confidence. In fact, the confidence level that this fellow by the name of Raymond Merriman uses is that if we have a 80% historical context that supports what we believe, and which gets me to my next point. They're one of the important, they're all important cycles. There are 6-year cycles, there are 24-month cycles. There's a 92-year cycle in the markets. Mm-hmm. But the one that really is most important to individual investors, because we're only going to go through a few cycles. Nobody's even lived through a 92-year cycle.
Right.
And so is the 18-year cycle. Now that doesn't mean it's 18 years. That means on average, if we looked at the last couple of 100 years, it's averaged 18 years. It could be a 16-year cycle. That might be a 21-year cycle. But if we look at it over a period of time, it's an 18-year cycle.
That's interesting. Well, 18 years.
And it's a big one.
Right.
Big one.
What's in crypto?
We're coming toward the end of one.
In crypto, I saw that maybe because it's new technology and like you said before, the adoption is really fast. I saw some charts and they were saying that the big swings are every 4 years. So maybe that's more compressed or something.
There are astrologers who write reports on it, including Merriman, the guy I like to follow. Mm-hmm. And there are definitely theories on market swings that may be useful, but he himself says, the market is too volatile, and we don't have enough historical data to really
compare it,
to really be confident about what we're predicting.
Right. Okay. So yeah, it's such a new thing, and
it is a new thing, and it's exciting, and I think it's cool, and we want freedom.
Yes.
And I think crypto and digital currencies represent man's desire for freedom to be out of control of the banking cartels.
Right. Because you can just have the money by yourself, owning just a couple of codes, and that's your password, and nobody can crack it because it's really hard to hack these things. So yes. It seems very secure, and you can send money to anywhere in the world without paying extra charges to the bank and then taking some time and all. This is instantaneous, it's safe, but people have lost billions by losing their passwords and stuff. So there's that too.
It's got its downsides.
Yes. Are you predicting any kind of huge upswing or downswing in the markets? Downswing.
Yes.
Now.
Big crash. and a long-term bear market is coming. And
Really?
we need to, astrologers are now looking at where are the signs that the markets have topped up. And we're talking about the US market, of course. Well, I'm in the US, and so,
Right.
but I think at least at some level, we can still look at the US as the driver of economic activity.
Yeah.
And so that's the market we can look at. But anyway, we're looking at an 18-year cycle ending, which means a crash and a bear market.
Oh, so the crash.
And that's why I decided to start speaking again, and that's why I'm on interview with you, and I'm doing a more formal online seminar a week from Sunday.
Cool. So you're saying that it didn't start in 2020, actually starting now, the new cycle, the 18-year cycle.
Well, the 18-year cycle, we're running toward the end of it right now. So, if we take, I think it started maybe 15 years ago.
And how does it go? Does it start at the bottom, or does it go down?
Well, it starts the first third of a cycle, and all cycles have, when we know all these things because we can chart this stuff.
Right.
And so the beginning of a bull market always has these characteristics. It could have a single top, it could have a double top, it might even occasionally have a triple top, but we know there's some parallel, there's some consistencies there. And so the second third of a bull market is different. And then on the way down, a bear market has some similar characteristics where we look at the bottom, where we may have we rarely see a single bottom, we usually see a double bottom. Right. To be able to determine when is this market likely to go and change into a bull market. But we're now at the top of a bull market, clearly.
Oh, wow. So now
which means that a bear market is coming.
It's gonna go down even more. Because I know crypto has been going down.
We're looking at toward the ending of an 18-year cycle. And we need to start, and we look for that. So now we start looking at, okay, where are the astrological symbolisms, and where are the charting symbolisms of when to look for, and as we get closer, we start looking at, okay, it looks like we're close. And so from my perspective, what can I do about it? Well, I can help people a lot. I can guide people to reducing their exposure to the stock market, start accumulating cash, because assets are going to be cheap at the bottom of the next market. And so if you have cash, you can take advantage of that valley and become wealthy in the next bull market. Wow.
So that means, let's see, a third of 18 years is about what is it? Six years. So the next 6 years, somewhere in the next 6 years is going to bottom out.
We're somewhere in the next 6 years, it's going to top out.
Oh, it's going to top out.
We're probably 3 to 5 years from the ending of this bull market, but it could be next year or it could be this year. Again, an 18-year cycle is not exactly an 18-year cycle. It could be a 15-year cycle. Oh. It could be a 21-month cycle, 21-year cycle. On average, the 18-year cycle is 18 years.
Right. So you're predicting that in the next 2 years is going to crash.
Sometime in the next probably 3 to 5 years. But it could be next year, or it could be even later this year. So now we have to start looking at, okay, where are the symbolisms? And so this is when the time to start preparing ourselves.
Sell your stocks. No, I'm kidding.
Actually, yes.
What about
but then,
crypto?
Of course, if you have
sell the crypto as well,
millions of dollars worth of stock,
yes,
that's highly appreciated. If you sell it all at once, you not only have a huge tax bill because of normal taxation, you are in the United States, at least, and probably in other Western countries, there's progressive taxation based on the amount of money you make.
Right.
And so suddenly you push yourself into the highest tax bracket possible by dumping it all at once. So it's not that simple from
You know
a
what's
strategy perspective.
you know what's also not that simple, Frank, is that
Hold on 1 second, okay? I gotta get my charger.
okay.
Hold on 1 second.
I think we'll probably wrap up pretty soon. Um, but I just wanted to ask, because like sometimes in crypto, it seems like it's the opposite. What's happening in normal stock market is the opposite of what's happening in crypto. But not always the case. So maybe if, yeah, right. So
There's not enough historical data is the bottom line.
right. Okay. It's a new frontier, so anything is possible.
Yes. And again, I would say we want freedom.
Right.
And certainly crypto has that element of it that frees us.
Yeah, and maybe, like you said before, if things are happening quick, maybe that means that, does that possibly mean that cycles could be quicker as well, or is that not a consideration?
It's not a consideration from the perspective of my work.
Right.
Because I have to have some, some grounding of my advice to people. And so I'm going back into this work again.
Nice.
After having been kind of retired for quite a long time.
So what would be your last message? Obviously, you say there's a positive message. You think then by 2030, there'll be a big positive upswing in
we
the
are
world.
moving into a very, very, very bright future. I think there'll be new technologies. There'll be new inventions that will, I think, if you look at new technologies or new inventions, if you look at it, very common experience at the US Patent Office is more than one inventor trying to get a patent on some things that are very similar.
Right.
Very common experience. The Wright brothers, whom we traditionally think of as the inventors of the airplane, were only about 2 weeks behind a French people that invented flying. And it was actually, there's some question about whether the Wright brothers were first. I think there was a British, there was somebody in Brazil, I think,
Right.
that may have flown the first airplane. So the point of this is, it's like consciousness suddenly dumps an idea and we have access to that idea. And so more than one person
gets it.
It's like simultaneously gets it and moves on it. Well, if we look at the history of humanity, everything that is invented is weaponized.
That too, yeah, unfortunately.
And so, so there's a speculation that when we, when that propensity diminishes enough, that miraculous inventions will suddenly download from the ethers, from the field of infinite potentials, that will greatly change and improve our lives. And so that will happen. That will happen. We also, and I also talk a little bit about that I think we need to prepare for. We're actually in a, weather-wise, we're actually in a cooling cycle.
Oh.
And we don't need to get into a discussion of whether it's human caused or whether it's part of the natural cycles. But climatologists and climate scientists who study ice core samples know that we're in a cooling cycle.
Now, starting
Because you
now,
can-
or
Yes,
the past
right
couple
now.
years. Okay.
Right now. See,
Okay.
yeah, everybody's making a big deal about the North Pole shrinking. Yeah, but guess what? The South Pole is adding mass.
Hmm.
So, so we don't need to. So it's time to stop fighting about the cause of it. That's stupid. But and what we really need to begin preparing for is the eventuality, the eventuality of it. And that could be, I mean, here in the United States, we've had these crazy winter weather patterns. People froze to death in Texas. They don't even have heating systems in houses in Texas.
Right. Get
Because
it
they don't need
installed.
them.
Get it installed. It's gonna
Because
get
they
cold.
don't need them. Well, it's, yeah, get them installed. But even more important, you know, if you look at the last mini ice age in the 1600s, 1700s, most of the rivers in Europe were frozen over year after year after year. They never lost. They were frozen all the time. So if we are entering into a mini ice age, and I say we are entering into another mini ice age, and you know, you can do your own research. But it's so simple. So if you're living in the United States and up north where it's likely to be a sheet of ice most of the year, if not all the year, and the grid is going to break down. The grids are breaking down in the United States all the time during peak times of heat waves in the US. The grid breaks down and suddenly you have no electricity for a while. Cold, you can't escape cold. Your car won't start if it gets cold enough. So, I mean, it's really a simple preparation for most of the US and Canada. Get a wood stove.
Right. Start a
How simple
fire
is
in your
that?
own home. Have some wood there.
Have some wood there. Have a wood stove. And so I think so. One of the things that I think is already being kind of developed, it isn't working very well. It's kind of like some of the ideas that Tesla had. You know, there's stories about his workshop, which show big holes in the ceiling where it's not where he changed the mass of an object.
Mm.
And suddenly, poof, it exploded. But he didn't know how to duplicate it. It just kind of happened. He goes, wow, I wish I knew what I did.
He changed the mass of an object? Wow.
There are holes in the ceilings of his workshop. I'm not kidding.
Right.
I haven't seen it, but I've read about this. That's a technology. So we'll see some energy systems that don't rely on huge infrastructure and grids that break down. In the United States, they're breaking down all the time.
Right.
Winter and summer, they're breaking down all the time.
Especially because they're above ground as well.
If you're in a cold climate and it's -20, whether it's Celsius or Fahrenheit, it doesn't matter.
Right.
If you go outside, you'll freeze to death. If your grid breaks down and your heat system relies on electricity, you're dead.
Right. So yeah, wood stove. That sounds like, yeah.
Very simple. So I think we just have to prepare for it. There is climate change, but it's not a warming cycle. It's a cooling cycle that we're in. And by the way, the last ice age was preceded by does this sound familiar? Heating and erratic weather patterns. Sound familiar?
Yes. Okay. So this might be an idea is to go to Africa now, because Africa will get colder. It won't be as hot.
You know, I'm thinking wintering and summering in Mexico.
Nice. Cool, Frank. Wow. But this might be maybe the longest podcast, or one of the longest I've ever done. But it's been, I think we could talk, but probably more.
Yes.
Actually. And I will link also, if you do the talk, and it will be on YouTube.
I'll
link
send
that.
you the links for it. And I would like to link our conversation today to that also, because I think we've had an interesting conversation.
Yes, indeed. And yeah, if we're entering a cooling cycle, that'll be quite interesting, because then there'll be a lot more snow, which I'm actually looking forward to.
I hate it.
Well, you're from Indonesia originally, so that's why.
Yes.
All right, Frank Van
It's been a
Waardenburg.
pleasure. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you for being on, Frank, and I wish you all the best, and it was a pleasure.
We'll be in touch.
And thank you everybody for listening and watching.
Bye-bye.